All right, what is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another day of SaberSim's DFS office hours. Today is Monday, November 4th of 2024, and looking ahead here, we have Thursday night football between I forgot who's playing today. The Bucks and the Chiefs, and then we have a huge 15-game NBA main slate. They have NBA today. Everybody plays. Nobody plays tomorrow. Complete day off for the NBA season, and then all teams are back on Wednesday. So going to be a couple crazy couple days here for the NBA season with games starting every 15 minutes. But either way, for those of you who are new here, welcome. My name is Andrew, one of the coaches over here at SaberSim. This is a show where we go over how to use the SaberSim app, answer any and all DFS-related questions. Get your questions in one of three ways here. First off, send us an email, support@sabersim.com. Second, post it live in the YouTube chat. Third way, post it in the office hours channel in our Discord server. If you're not in our Discord and want to get access to that channel, there is a link in the description of this video. You also get access to our Sim Alert channels, individual sport channels, and to get access to the rest of the SaberSim team. So always a good thing to be in the Discord. But with that said, we do this show Monday through Friday, 4 p.m. Eastern. We do this show on Saturdays at 12:30 p.m. Eastern. We will not have office hours Friday or Saturday of this week. Just a heads up to you guys. And then I will be doing the build review show today at 5 p.m. Eastern. And then I will be doing it on Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern as well. So I want to make sure I get 2 build review shows in every week. One at the beginning of the week, one at the end. So if you guys want to get signed up for that, all you got to do, drop a DK username in the office hours channel in our Discord server, and I will add you to the list for the next show. So we only had one person sign up today so far. So if anybody else wants to get signed up, today is a pretty good day to get your builds reviewed. But it is Monday, so we do have to announce the winners for our weekly Max Challenge prizes. Let's go down to prizes. So today, going to be announcing our top finisher and selecting our one random entrant winner to win free entry into next week's mini-max. So for our top finisher, we have a really, really close one here. Jay Clement 11 with a second place finish, 244.2 points. Congratulations. Still super cool. Still, get a nice prize up at the top of that contest. So congrats, Jay Clement. They are going to be our top finisher for the week, getting an entry into our end of the season free roll and winning a custom SaberSim hoodie. And then for everybody else who participated, we're going to grab all these names and we are going to throw them in our trusty wheel of names here. 267 people. Let those names populate. All right, we're going to click shuffle 2 times. And we are going to spin to see who wins free entry into next week's Mini-Max contest. Smitty11 is our random entrant winner. They're going to win free entry to next week's contest. So Smitty11, congratulations to both of the 11s here. Jay Clement 11, Smitty11 taking the 2 prizes for the week. So appreciate everybody continuing to participate in that challenge. And for the winners, our support team will reach out to you and let you know how to claim your prizes. But with that said, let's get SaberSim up here. And we'll get going and jump right into some questions. So I'm going to get SaberSim up. We're going to get some questions in the queue. We'll start with the questions that come in Discord first, as always. And then we will go from there. So looks like our first question came in from Vince. Got some more questions on the list here. Some interesting bankroll discussion today. We could definitely touch on that. 2 questions from Dark Horse. And then I see one in the YouTube chat. So that should keep us pretty busy today to get started. But we will go from there. And some interesting NBA discussion as well. Got to catch up on this. We got Matt weighing in on it as well. All right, so let's get SaberSim up. And give me 1 second. Sorry about that. So our first question today, you know what? Let's just go down the list. So first question today coming in from the YouTube chat. Question says, how do you suggest we late swap in NBA with 15 minutes between each game? So this is a pretty interesting one. You know, it is a very, very interesting day for NBA. So we got this. Oh, they're splitting it up into 8-game main. I saw there's like 15 games total. I think FanDuel is running all of the games. So it looks like DK is running like a split. And then FanDuel is running a 15-game main, which is pretty intense, right? So if you want to see all the games, you know, you could see them over here on FanDuel. And the way I would be handling this, so I would say that I would not be swapping in between every window unless there was news. So let's say that, you know, lock gets started right at 4 p.m. on the West Coast. And then the next game is at 4:15. If there is no news about projections changing or no significant projection changes in the Discord and the lineup alert channel, I'm not going to swap, right? And the reason for that is I am most interested in taking advantage of live projections. Well, basketball games do not start on time. In case anybody does not know that, tip-off is usually about 10 minutes after the listed time. So that game would only be about 5 minutes in, and there's just not going to be enough relevant information to actually, you know, use, right? I would probably be waiting maybe this like 45 minute window game, the 4:45 p.m. game, or even the 5 p.m. game. You know, I noticed this like during MLB season, like usually once the game's about an hour in, you might see some interesting things that can be worth swapping for as far as player production and different things like that. So those are my thoughts there. I have heard people say like, oh, but like you get to take advantage of like the actual ownerships and things like that. That is true, right? If you're trying to squeeze out every edge you can definitely do that. For me, I get a little bit more life EV from not swapping just because games have locked for ownership purposes. So it's going to depend how much time you have, how much time you want to invest. But in my opinion, projection changes are the biggest thing. And if at lock, you know, no projections change, which is unlikely, but it could happen. You know, I'd probably do my like first late swap if nothing changed at like this 5 p.m. window, because like at least 2 of these games are like 45 minutes in here, and we might start to see some interesting things as far as projections go and players outperforming or underperforming what their expectation is. So those are my thoughts. All right, next question. Notice this week on NFL that my ROI and uniques were good, but the Sim Avg Score was pretty poor across the board. Not sure why this is and how to improve it. I use a min projection filter about 10 points below the highest projected team in every contest. So I almost think you don't need to do anything, right? It is okay to have a lower Sim Avg Score, right? Like every day that we go in and we do the build review show, I always say like, hey, there's like a Sim Avg Score band that you need to be within, right? It's usually like plus or minus like 5 points. So it's like, hey, you know, the highest sets are like 135 to 140, right? And it's only when people are outside of that band that things get bad as far as their ROI goes. But here's the thing, right? We see people get to high ROIs different ways. Some of them, like for a showdown, for instance, play higher average dupe lineups, but also higher Sim Avg Score. some people play lower Sim Average Score lineups, but they're also lower duplicated, right? So it is okay to have a Sim Average Score that is lower as long as your uniqueness as far as average dupes is low, right? So if your ROI is coming in high, you shouldn't be worried about your lower Sim Average Score. You're just getting to a high ROI a different route, right? Think about, like, there are ways to get to high ROIs with high projected score lineups. There are ways to get to high ROI lineups with lower projected score lineups. You're just taking that alternate route, which is still a path to a high ROI, and you shouldn't be super worried about it. So that's my opinion there. I don't think you need to read too much into it. The ROI is what you want to be focusing on. All right, next question. Can we discuss in office hours a good minimum volume threshold for ultimate members? This isn't a complaint about the $300 per month cost. I'm just merely asking, what is the recommended minimum monthly wager amount for ultimate members? I think we could all agree that it'd be almost impossible to be net positive SaberSim member betting $5 per slate. But what is that threshold? To piggyback on that last thing, definitely love the contest sims and the ultimate product, just not a strong enough math guy to know, okay, I really should be betting X per month, assuming an achievable ROI. We think we can still profit. Okay, so good question here. Sometimes, people say like, hey, what's like a good bankroll, right, that justifies this membership? That's a little bit the wrong way to think about it, right? You're thinking about it the right way. Like, hey, what is the right volume I need to play? Because you could have a bankroll and you could play just NFL main slates on Sundays, or you could be playing NBA every day, right? Or NHL or whatever other sports going on. So it really does come down to like minimum volume in a month. And you could be playing multiple sports a day. Like, there are so many ways to get action down in DFS. So, some like general numbers that get like thrown around the DFS industry is like a 10% ROI is like pretty good, right? So I think you can kind of work backwards from there, where it's like, okay, if my goal is to achieve a 10% ROI a month, then that would mean that I need to get $3,000 in action in the month, right? And then, okay, there are 30 days in the month. So then that would mean about $100 a day in action. But maybe you're playing, like $100 a day in action, right? And then you could even work like further backwards and be like, okay, I'm playing, NBA and NFL, and then NFL is this many days a week, and then NBA is this many days a week. How many of these days can I actually play? Like, if you're taking weekends off, right? Or if you have like other commitments. So then you could be like, okay, between my NFL action and my NBA action, I'm getting about this much down a week, and you can kind of go from there, right? So that's the way I would be thinking about it. I think if you start with like a 10% ROI goal of yours, that should help you to figure out, what is like a good amount to be getting down a day. Now, not to say that, I think the one thing about DFS is that, your winnings like for the year, sometimes do come from like 1 to 2 wins like a year. And that's something that, is a little bit tricky about DFS, right? Like, I remember last NFL season, we had a user and they won like 15K in like a playoff slate. And that was in like January. And they posted for the winner circle and they were like, I lost every regular season week of NFL, but this win puts me ahead on the year. And, when they look back at their season, their ROI was probably decent, right? It was probably like higher than 10%. But they're not like churning that 10% on an actual monthly basis, right? So it gets a little bit tricky there. But you got to do, whatever makes the most sense to you. I'll say one thing that, I see some people do sometimes, and I do recommend against this, is overextending themselves, for a membership. And what I say is like, hey, if you're new to DFS, if you're trying to find a winning process, start on the starter plan, right? That's why it's called starter, right? You're getting used to things. You're building a process. And then once you build your successful process and you're starting to see some results, think about the subscription levels as like a staircase where you find your footing on one stair and you get your balance before you take your next step, right? I mean, that's how people walk, right? So find your footing on, the starter, and then go up to ultimate if that's the way you're trying to approach it. I think that's totally cool. So got to figure out whatever makes sense to you and kind of roll from there. All right. Next question. Let's say I run a build along with running a contest sim, and I send the lineups I like to the favorites. I do it all over again, along with some tweaks for different lineups. Once I have all those lineups and favorites, is it safe to rerun Sims, diversify, and fill my lineups with either direct or autofill? Thanks. So I would not. I mean, I don't. To be honest, I don't know why people run Sims in the favorites tab. And that could just be because they're using it differently than I am. But like just reading through your question, you're saying I run a build and I run contest sims. And then I send the lineups I like to the favorites. And then you do like another build with like some other stuff where you run your contest sim, you send those to favorites, right? For me, that would be like it. Like, hey, build one, I ran some lineups with some rules, whatever, sent those to the favorites. I did build two, I did some other rules, I ran my contest sim there, I sent those to the favorites. You could have done 10 lineups in build one, 10 lineups in build two, you send 20 lineups to favorites, and then now you're like, okay, I have my 20 lineups for my 20 max. I don't really see the need to run another contest sim in that scenario. Unless you're thinking about something that I'm not, right? Because you've already run it and you've already identified the lineups that you want to play. So I'm not 100% sure what rerunning the Sims does for you at that point. But it definitely is okay to fill your lineups from the favorites tab at that point if I'm following you. Right? And you don't need to see their ROI values because you know that they already had them in the build that they came from. So maybe that's something to do with it. But your work really should be in the builds. And then the favorites is just a way of combining the lineups into a single contest. At least that's the way it's designed. I'm sure there are use cases where it's different, but that's the only way I've ever thought about using it. So I would be interested to hear how people are using it differently. All right. Next question. Would you please explain percentiles more? What are they? How would I use them? Also provide an example of it with any DFS sport. Thanks. Yeah, let's talk about percentiles. So first thing to call out is we have this really good video on percentiles in our support docs. You go to help in the top right corner, go to support. This frequently asked questions and glossary. You're going to find this video, player and lineup percentiles. This is the video that you're effectively looking for here. It's going to explain what you need to know about percentiles. So I'm going to send that to you and post it here in the YouTube chat for anybody who wants to check that out after the show, but we will still talk about them. So there's two types of percentiles. There's player percentiles and lineup percentiles. Lineup percentiles are basically like summary information. So, for instance, we look at Nikola Jokic. His 99th player percentile says 95.5. So what that means is that in 1% of our sims, his top 1% outcomes, he scores at least 95.5 points or more. And then so similarly, like 25th is the score that he achieves 75% of the time. So 53.9 points is what he's getting about 75% of the time. These numbers are coming from his range of outcomes in the sim, which you can see by clicking on him. Now, this is just player by player. Lineup percentiles work differently. So the way a lineup percentile works is that we build all your lineups first. Those lineups go into your pool. After the lineups are built, SaberSim goes back into the sims, and then it says, hey, how did this combination of players score across all the sims that we ran? So it will go and look at the combination of, in this top lineup, Russell Westbrook, is it D'Angelo Russell? Yeah, D'Angelo Russell, Zach LaVine, Kobe White, Corey Kispert, LeBron James, Patrick Williams, Naz Reid, Nikola Jokic. It will go and find those players and say, hey, in the sims, how did these players do? And it will effectively create a graph for the set of players as a whole, as opposed to just one of them individually. So then when we see a lineup percentile of, 95th percentile, it says 387 points. This is saying, hey, this lineup achieved 387 fantasy points 5% of the time in the sims that we ran. So you can sort by percentiles alone. Percentiles are variables in the SaberScore formula. You can go in and see. So this small slate 100 to 1K SaberScore, I'm going to see 99th percentile is a weight. It is a variable in the formula here. So we're using those. And, you can create your own custom metrics with these. You could do filters based on percentiles. There's a bunch of different ways to use it. But that is a breakdown of what they are and how they work. All right. Next question. How can I be successful on FanDuel showdowns? So in case you guys haven't seen it, we do have some good showdown content that you guys can check out. Let me see if it's in here. So in Saber School, if you go to how to beat DFS, check out this master the art of NFL DFS showdowns. This content does hold true for both DraftKings and FanDuel, as shown in the thumbnail here. I'm pretty sure Jordan does a DraftKings demo. The only difference there, right, is if like you're using geometric mean or anything like that. The formula is going to change slightly because DraftKings has 6 players in their lineups and FanDuel only has 5. So that's the biggest thing. But this Master the Art of NFL Showdown is going to be the best video that you can watch to get better at showdown contests. All right, next question. Is unique random getting phased out as I do not see as many examples of using it anymore, or is there still any edges for still using it, like example autofill? So unique random is not an option for autofill. I'm sorry, for unique random is not an option, in autofill. And the reason for that is because in autofill, we are looking at one contest at a time. The way unique random works is it needs to look at a group of contests at a time. That's why it's only an option in direct fill. So it's not that unique random is getting phased out. It's that it is a direct fill only option. And we're mostly suggesting that people use autofill where it's not an option. So the reason it's not an option is because the way unique random works is if I have 3 single entries, it can put the top lineup into the third contest. It could put the second lineup into the first. It can randomly assign 3 lineups into 3 single entries. Autofill looks at one contest at a time. So there is, whether I'm using unique random, unique rank, or rank, it can't randomly assign it because there's only one contest to fill. So that's what's happening. That's why unique random is only a direct fill option. And most of our messaging is to use autofill. So it just has no bearing in autofill. Whether you use unique rank or unique random, it's effectively the same because we're only looking at one contest. All right. Can you explain in NBA why Sims are giving us such crazy amounts of less than 10% owned players? These players are usually value who are close to minimum price. I am not basing a positive ROI when lowering exposures. I know I can adjust exposures, but projections have been way off along with ownership. All right, so I want to go and read Matt's response to this first, because I do keep a pretty close eye on these things. So let's see what Matt said. So Matt said, hey, all, wanted to offer some clarity on the NBA issues that have been brought up here the last few days. First of all, as always, we take our models and this sort of feedback very seriously. The team has been actively working on improvements and will continue to do so throughout the season, but we recognize that we've had some big misses so far. Short version, while we have seen some really strong results from the NBA model so far, our internal model for players without props has made a few mistakes so far this season, which has led to projections that differ from the industry, and therefore some big projections and therefore ownership misses that have had a huge impact on default exposures. We're changing our process short term to prevent this by adding significantly more oversight and making longer term changes to our models and processes to address the issue moving forward. Long version threaded below. Oh man, this is long. All right. I'm going to read this because I haven't read it and I kind of want to. Regarding those misses, I'll try to offer utilizing Vegas odds and props in the model. We are really happy with how that has gone so far. And overall, our projections are much higher and more accurate than in the past. The trickiness comes from the players that we don't have props on the sports books. We've done a ton of work over the past few months on creating a much better internal model for these players, both in terms of their minutes and their efficiency/usage. Again, in the aggregate and for the vast majority of cases, we are really happy with how this has turned out. However, there have been a handful of cases per day so far this season where our assumption about a player without props has differed from the rest of the industry. Sometimes it's just an uncertain situation where our guess as to how teams will deploy their rotations differs from others. Other times we've frankly just been wrong, and unfortunately, because this tends to affect low salary, high value players, it has a very large impact on exposures and lineup composition. Some of you have specifically pointed out the ownership errors as the main issue here, but we believe that addressing the core projections is the most important focus and will naturally improve ownership as a side effect. As a side note, I do want to point out that NBA is by far the most difficult sport to project in terms of ownership, and I want to set expectations that you will definitely see bigger misses there than any other sport. Even with these broader fixes in place, NBA lineups are extremely sensitive to very small changes in projection for low salary players. The industry projecting a 3K salary player for 18 points versus 16 points will have a drastic impact on their ownership. And with how late injury or starting lineup news can come, it's almost impossible to predict what the field will do in brand new situations. Unexpected starter, key player out, etc. In the short term, we've added another level of oversight to our projections this week. While we have always been monitoring inputs and outputs and checking for outliers, it is sometimes difficult to catch these cases in the chaos of news. Having more eyes on the data will allow us to identify problems with minutes or usage projections and address them quickly. Long term, we have a few updates coming shortly to improve the sim results for all players, especially those without props, and we'll be making further changes to the automated minutes and performance models to better project players with little data. I also want to spend some time specifically looking at improving variance and uncertainty in the sims so that we're baking in the chance that our assumptions about rotations are wrong. Process-wise, we plan on using the aforementioned additional oversight as an opportunity to solidify and improve our process for manually checking/adjusting sim inputs and outputs. That turned out to be much more of a novel than I planned. Let me know if you have any questions, and we appreciate the constructive feedback. All right, that's what Matt had to say on the issue. I kind of missed this, been wrapped up in some other things. So it's pretty interesting, right? I keep a very, very close eye on NBA and I'm super in tune with all of the games. Ultimately, I think some of the hardest situations kind of like Matt said, are where guys get a spot start. And I think that, starting is an important word in our models, in our systems. When a player is starting, we are expecting them. They basically have a guaranteed minutes, right? The team is saying this person is going to be on the court to start the game. Now, any player on the bench is technically not guaranteed to get into the game, right? So we always kind of weigh starters a little bit more. The hard part is when a person gets a start and maybe they haven't started that much. Maybe they haven't played that many minutes off the bench, but for some reason they're starting, right? I think a good example was somebody like Doug McDermott the other day. Oh my God, what team does he play for? I think he plays for Sacramento. And Kevin Huerter was out, and everyone kind of thought like, hey, Malik Monk, he's like the next guy up. He should get those minutes. But the team wanted to keep Malik Monk coming off the bench as like their sixth man, and they give Doug McDermott the start. And in that situation, SaberSim is going to be like, okay, hey, McDermott is the announced starter. He should get so many minutes, right? And I think we projected him for like maybe 18 minutes or something like that. And he ended up playing less than that, right? And the team played him, but Monk ended up getting the minutes kind of as expected, right? So when teams do weird stuff like that, give a guy like a spot start or kind of like mess up what like kind of the expectation is, and then they kind of go back to it. It's a little hard like for the models to understand that, right? So what I always recommend is doing something like this, right? So let's go to NBA for today. I think this is a good step in your process to add if you're not doing it, to maybe identify some of these situations, right? So what you can do is you can start the day by coming into the player table and sorting by value, and then just kind of noting some of these top players. So, okay, top value player, Luke Cornett, clearly high value, way above everybody else. He's 6.5, everyone else like 5.9 or less. Why is Cornett value, right? Make a list of some of the top few players here, right? I'll do the top three: Cornett, George, Carrington. And then I'm going to go to Boston. I'm like, okay, why is Cornett showing up? This doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And then I come in here, and then I'm like, okay, Porzingis is out. Okay. But something that's interesting to me is that, Horford also plays center. He's higher salary. And I'm actually kind of surprised that we're seeing I'm surprised by what we're seeing, right? A situation where I would not be surprised is if Horford was out as well, which was actually the case the last time Boston played, right? So I could go back to yesterday, right? I could do a little bit of research. I think Boston played Saturday. So we had this Boston-Charlotte game. It's like, okay, what about the last time this team played? What happened then? This could give you some insight too, right? Go check their last game. All right, so I'm going to go to utility. I'm going to see, okay, so last game, Horford and Cornett did start, right? They did start together. Okay, in this game, Jaylen Brown was out, right? I don't remember if I saw that Jaylen Brown was out today. So then I could like, I am taking the step to verify like the few top values on the slate, right? So, okay, go back to Boston. Okay, so Jaylen Brown is out again. So this makes sense. So last game, Cornett started with Jaylen Brown out and Porzingis out, right? So a very similar situation to the last time they played. Okay, well, what actually happened, right? What happened in this game? And maybe I just go to ESPN and I just go and see, how many minutes he played. Okay, Saturday, Celtics. Go to the box score. Okay, Cornett played 30 minutes. Horford played 27 in the exact same situation. So today we're projecting Horford for 27 minutes and Cornet for 28. I mean, this looks reasonable to me. This same situation happened. We can verify that he did play and that he got good minutes. And, you could even look like, hey, like how many shots did he take? You know what I mean? Like 19 points, very active in the fantasy scoring department. I think the Cornet value makes sense. I'd be perfectly fine with it, right? A situation where I wouldn't be fine is maybe Jaylen Brown is back today. Maybe Jaylen Brown is back in, but we're still projecting Cornet for a lot of minutes, but we're thinking that like, hey, he's going to come off the bench and play. Well, now that's, you're not 100% sure that's going to happen, right? Because we haven't seen a similar situation. So you can take this step of like verifying some of the top values and making sure like you agree with them. And because, you are generally going to get more exposure to some of these high value players. We can go do the same thing in Washington, right? Go to Washington. Okay. Hey, Kyle Kuzma's out today, right? We're expecting Carrington to play more. We're expecting George to play more, right? These guys have minutes in like the high 20s for George, low 30s for Carrington. Hey, is this Kuzma's first game out? Was he out last game, right? You go back. We do the same thing, right? We look. Last game. Looks like Washington's on this slate. Where did Washington go? Second. Oh, they weren't on the main slate here, but they're here. We got the showdown. So let's go check the showdown. Okay, hey, look, last game Kuzma was out. This game too, great. We have an example to go off of. Carrington and George both started. Okay, that makes sense. And you're just telling a story, right? You're trying to do the projections and the minutes and the points and the ownership. Does it make sense? Does it tell a story, right? I come in here. Okay, hey, Carrington, most minutes on the team, 37 minutes. George, 27 minutes here, right? Didn't even shoot that good. Scored 6 points, still played 27 minutes. Go back to Monday. Go to Washington. Okay, Carrington, 32 minutes. He played 37. Same situation. Seems good. George played 27 minutes. Didn't play great, but 28 minutes is kind of right in the same ballpark. I'd be good with both of these, right? I think it's cool. See, now what we can do is like we go back to Sacramento. Okay, so see, like here, see, this is something I'd probably be keeping an eye on tonight, right? Like, hey, Herter is questionable, right? If he sits, who plays, right? And right now, Keon Ellis has minutes off the bench. Like Monk has minutes off the bench. And then we're not even projecting Doug McDermott. Doug McDermott is down here in the zeros. You guys can't even see him, right? So then, I would be like, okay, if Herter sits, I kind of want to check to see like who's starting and things like that, right? You could do some risk management. So I think that matters a lot in NBA. I think what Matt said about like a player being projected for 16 points versus 18 points is actually a big difference and matters a lot in NBA. So those are my thoughts. I think this is a good thing to do regularly in your process and something that maybe, some of you will add, which is great. All right. Samuel said, how do you use SaberSim for NBA single stat slates? So the official answer is that we do not support those slates. We don't have tools built out for them. I don't know what would be a good way of using SaberSim for those type of slates, especially with our model being more prop heavy. So I haven't thought about it too much. We would probably have to come up with some internal like agreement. I don't want to kind of just like talk on the fly on this one because I could say something that, the data guys definitely disagree with, right? So the official answer is that we don't support single slates at the moment, and to tread carefully if you do decide to use SaberSim to play those. All right, Chuck said, hey, Andrew, what do you think about maxing the min uniques that allow all lineups to be positive ROI and then sending those lineups to the favorites tab, then from the favorites tab, running multiple contest sims to see if it remains positive no matter which sample of sims are used to determine how many uniques to use? Okay, I got to reread this one. Hey, Andrew, what do you think about maxing the min uniques that allow all lineups to be positive ROI and then sending those lineups to the favorites, then from the favorites tab, running the multiple contest sims to see if it remains positive no matter what? So this sounds like self-simming, right? This is like the idea of basically building lineups and, you know, maybe you like set a filter for ROI greater than 0. And then you take all of the ROI greater than 0 lineups and then you put those in a build and then contest sim them against itself, right? So this sounds exactly like a concept that we used to talk about like in like August about simming your build against itself. We've moved away from recommending that because as a result of that conversation in the ultimate video that came up with that idea, we made updates to our contest sim so people didn't have to do that, right? So we could start to account for that automatically, and so users didn't have to do that. So I'm not somebody who's like recommending self-simming anymore or using self-sims myself. I think our more portfolio-based approach to contest sims of understanding how many entries you have in the contest is a awesome update and accounts for this. So I don't think it's as important, if I'm following. All right, Zach said, is it possible to select all of the different ownership fields at once to compare and contrast the different stakes? I was an old SaberSim sub years ago, and I'm recently just getting back into DFS. Well, welcome, and thanks for checking us out again. So is it possible to select all the different ownership fields at once to compare and contrast the different stakes? Good question. There isn't like a tabular way to like I could imagine, you know, it's like exposure for this field and exposure for that one and exposure for that one and exposure for that one. That information might be available in our CSV download. Let me check. So let's see. Percentiles. No. So there is not something that lists all of the different ownerships in a simple way. Now, if you, so for the time being, just so you guys know, if you guys want to see the exposures, right, you can just come into the My Ownership column and change your source here, right, from SaberSim ownership to something else. And then when you change it, right, say I change it to low stakes single entry, when I download this, the My Own column is going to be the SaberSim single entry ownership projections. Now, that being said, I think it would be pretty cool if we had all 13 ownership buckets listed as columns in the CSV download. So I will make a note here to add all own projections to CSV download as separate columns. I think that'd be pretty neat and make it a lot easier. So let me take that one back to the team. But good question. How many lineups can I save in the favorites tab? The answer is 500. 500 lineups in the favorites tab at once. If you are done with those lineups, you can right click on it and clear favorites, which trashing lineups within the favorites is different than clearing the favorites. So in order to completely get rid of the lineups, you need to clear them by right clicking on it, which is the only way to add more lineups at that point. Samuel said, okay, I feel whenever you guys add FPM as well as usage, it may be helpful for single stat type slates in the future, in my honest opinion. Yeah, I mean, we would have to like probably do a deep dive into the single stat stuff to see if we want to support it, but TBD on that stuff. I could let the team know people are asking for that. So let me put single stat support on my list of things to take back to the team. Zach, follow up. Currently, I set max exposure to high stakes single entry, min to high stakes MME, and then ownership to flagship MME. It's been useful so far. I would love to download all to CSV. Yeah, I can see how downloading them all to the CSV can definitely be useful. So I have that listed here, and I will get that over to the team. All right. Going back to the Discord to check any additional questions rolling in. And not seeing any. So good stuff there. Nice long show today. Samuel asked for starting 5 support as well. I can add both. So got that logged. But appreciate you guys tuning in. I will be back here in about 10-ish minutes for the build review show. I got to knock out a couple things in this next 10 minutes here. So going to try and be fast to get the show started on time. But appreciate you guys tuning in. I'll see you all soon. So until then, take care. Good luck. Thanks. Bye.